Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. This morning, we head straight on into our first segment. We have on set with us Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus, former presiding officer of the Tobago House of Assembly, joining us. Good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Julien. Good morning to our Tobago Updates viewing audience.
All right, so we got the conversation started immediately. Yesterday, we saw what would have been follow-up and continued reactions and responses. There was a press conference by the Prime Minister. There would have been a press conference by the Tobago Council, political leader of the People's National Movement, in response to the statement that was laid in the House, in the Tobago House of Assembly on Wednesday. I want to get from you in terms of what we'd probably describe as initial reactions based on the statement made on Wednesday from where you sit as a former presiding officer, and then the responses and possible course of actions being proposed by the Prime Minister.
Well, let me tell you, I think it's the biggest shame in Tobago at this time. It's really sad times in Tobago for us to have to walk through this. It's been almost 3 weeks that we are started down this road. Started with the audio gate, the press conference with many allegations, and now ended up in the Tobago House of Assembly chamber. And it was really sad to see how the chamber was misused and abused on the day held for that sitting. But a few weeks prior, when he misused the House for this statement where we thought it was a budget statement, and it became a statement on the conduct of the Prime Minister with this whole debacle between the cast and also the Tobago House of Assembly. In fact, putting in the chief administrator. I said back then that he was misleading the House. He should have been taken to the Privileges Committee, and that they were wrong to allow him to bring that statement, because 45(8) is clear on that. You cannot speak to the conduct of any one person in those offices, Parliament, THA, President, wherever, Judiciary. You cannot speak to them in a statement. You must have a motion in order to do it. And so, again, that was allowed to pass, and we now see where he pushed the button to even further taking the House down the road in which he did. And it is unfortunate, it is sad, and some measure of responsibility must be placed squarely within the desks of the presiding officer, because the presiding officer has the last say on what is allowed. And I want to share with you the process of a statement. When the statement is requested to be laid in the House, that statement must be submitted to the presiding officer through the clerk in its entirety. Okay? That statement is vetted, or should be vetted, by both the clerk and the presiding officer to make sure that it stays within the standing orders of the House. It is then approved. When the person who requested to make the statement goes into the House, that statement must be read verbatim. And when you listen to the language of the Chief Secretary in there, quite obscenities, it was clear that he was not sticking to the statement. And had the statement gone, I don't know whether she saw the videos in its entirety, whether the videos were given with the statement. But if those videos were submitted to her with the statement, then she is just as culpable, or even more so.
So I want to get from you, there is constant reference being made to the privileges of the House, the Parliament, the Tobago House of Assembly. Tell us a little bit, what does this mean in a very broad sense?
Okay, so there are disciplinary committees, and the disciplinary committee is called a privilege committee. Your privilege committee of the House, if someone has done things within the House that consistently breaches the standing orders, that misled the House, that has been overly disrespectful, or accusatory in some way to a member, you can send a person to the privilege committee. However, a motion has to be moved, and you must have the support of the House to send that person to the privilege committee. And I know that it has been brought up whether the chief secretary should be sent, and even now whether the presiding officer should be sent. And yes, I think the privilege motion should be brought, because then it would reside within the Hansard records that it was done. However, we all know, given the majority in the House, that it wouldn't go anywhere, because they would not vote to send their colleagues to the privilege committee. And that is why, Julian, that we have to consider truly changing the construct of the parliament to give us more democracy in there, similar to what we obtains in the Westminster system.
What the other area I want to get your take on, Dr. Angus, the boundaries as it relates to the levels of immunity. There is this feeling, and certainly the protection of the parliament and the House and the Tobago House of Assembly, that almost leaves the average man to say, you can say what you want in the House. This cannot necessarily be, challenged, or they are not necessarily the usual implications, as if you say it in a public space where somebody can automatically come and bring you before the courts of the law for various reasons, whether defamation of character, etc. Tell us a little bit about, that aspect of the law that allows that level of immunity to members of the parliament, members of the Tobago House of Assembly, etc.
To some extent, you can have that occur. But if a member came into the House and said, oh, I killed so and so, I hung him up, I did all of this, are we going to allow that and just say, well, he's under the cover of the House, so you cannot touch him even though it is a crime? So there has to be a level of, there has to be parameters. And whilst we allow people to say certain things in political banter and, inside of the politics, you have to draw a line. And when you looked at the tape, the gentleman clearly said, I was being interviewed by the police. I had been to them a number of times, and they want me now to sign that statement, and I have not been answering my phone calls. Clearly, the gentleman was in conversation, in interviews, whatever you want to call it, in a relationship with the police. And when you look at that, then you see, for someone who is who is embroiled in the investigation, to be interviewing a witness who has declared on camera that he is some type of person involved with the police, then the police have to do their work.
What is the hope coming out of this situation? Do you feel the Prime Minister will certainly have the legal grounds to be able to proceed with the matter? He has raised issues in relation to witness tampering. He has raised issues in relation to what appears to be, a further conspiring against, in terms of what is a current case and a matter. What are your thoughts on those issues?
So let us separate it, because witness tampering should not be under the purview of the Prime Minister. That is the police. The police have to do their work inside of that. Right. And therefore, you have the issue of the conduct, bringing the conduct of the Prime Minister into question. And that is where he can take action with that directly, because you broke the standing orders. There's no cover in there when you have broken the standing orders. There is no more cover inside of that. Had he brought the motion to bring into question those conducts as a motion that can be debated, then he would have had cover inside of the house.
So I wanted to just define for persons the difference between the statement versus the motion in the conduct in the context of the House.
Right. So when you bring a statement, the minority or the opposition was allowed one question of 15 seconds as per bringing a statement. That is laid out clearly within the standing orders as the rule. What they did was suspend the standing orders so that the statement can go on forever, because a statement is only supposed to be about 5 minutes. When Mr. Morris asked for the standing orders to be suspended so that he can bring additional questions, it was not. So the difference is 45.8 says that you cannot bring the conduct of any one of those offices into question without doing a motion. And what a motion does is the motion states clearly why you want to bring this, why you think the conduct is in question within the framework, and what at the end of the motion, what resolution that you want the House to carry. Inside of a motion, you are able to debate it. And so you're hearing all voices. You're hearing the majority giving what they think, and you're hearing the minority giving their part of it as to maybe why they don't agree or why they agree. And so that is the difference. With a motion, you hear all voices within the chamber. All voices have the opportunity to respond in the chamber, whereas with a statement, you don't have that opportunity.
All right. One of the other areas I'd like you to bring some clarity to, because the situation has now arisen on a much broader scale in relation to the matter has been raised. Some are raising concerns with the fact that the person who presented themselves is a stranger to the House. I want you to bring some clarity and that a better understanding of that to members of the public as to the definition used by the Prime Minister, and certainly the definition as per the standing orders regarding a stranger to the House.
Right. The term stranger is within the standing orders. Any visitor to the House is called a stranger. Okay? And according to the standing orders, no visitor to the House can have a voice in the House during a sitting, you're not even supposed to clap in the House as a stranger. Only the members in the House are allowed to speak and are allowed to desk thump, and so no stranger can have that voice. However, when you have committee, the committees of the House, which are not held in there, smaller committees, the committees can invite persons to give information to the committee that the committee then brings to the House. Okay? So what was said is that this was a way of getting a stranger to have a say in the House. And that is what those videos did. You gave voice to a stranger into the House inside of the videos.
Now, the Chief Secretary alluded to the more in the past, the situation regarding email gate and using the Assembly in a similar manner. The Prime Minister probably had some views on it. How would you make the comparison between the Prime Minister's use of the Parliament in terms of that whole situation regarding email gate and the Chief Secretary's use of the Assembly in these circumstances? Would you deem them as comparative? They are very different in the circumstances. How would you view them?
It's different. I don't think in email gate that the Prime Minister called the conduct of anyone into question, any one of those, authorities. And therefore, that is a distinct difference. Secondly, in email gate, bringing it to the Parliament, I don't think the Prime Minister was talking to anyone who was working with the police. So, as I said, there's nothing wrong with bringing the information. The process is what was in question. If he had stuck to a statement where he said he heard this and he heard that, and stuck to a clear statement, there's nothing wrong with bringing that. And inside of that statement, he could not have been talking about the Prime Minister and the TTPS. Okay? Additionally, if he brought a motion, he could have dealt with the conduct of the Prime Minister within the motion. There's also the issue that an ongoing investigation should not be allowed in the House such that it can prejudice anything, any decision that is being made by the courts. And it is unfortunate that with all of this public hoorah, you wonder how is it going to affect the court matter that may occur and may arise out of this whole situation.
All right.
So from that aspect, it also should not have been brought because, it's a matter that can prejudice the courts.
All right, viewers, at this point we take a break and we'll certainly be continuing the conversation as we discuss this very current and topical matter for us all. And so we want to remind you that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back with Dr. Angus.
Put a smile on your face when you're moving from place to place. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. We continue the conversation this morning with Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus. And, just before we went off to the break, interesting that you were speaking to, where do we go? Where do we go from here? And that's kind of where I want to take the conversation next. The situation has now occurred. We have since seen a response from the Prime Minister indicating that he will be using every possible arm of the law. We have heard indications by way of the sit-in from the Chief Secretary to write, to the region and to put it out there internationally in terms of the circumstances. Where do you see things going from here?
Well, first of all, in all fairness, Tobago would like to know, because Tobago is divided right now. It's divided across families because it's two Tobago boys who run in the islands. One in Trinidad, one in Tobago. So the families are divided. You then have the political divide happening. And so Tobago is in a state of unrest right now. And I think what we have to do is to be able to ensure that all allegations have been investigated all across the board and let the chips fall where they may. And all wrongdoing must also be addressed. We cannot allow the House has crashed. When you consider what has occurred over the last 3 months, the Tobago legislature has crashed because no order has been brought into the space at all. And therefore, all of those things have to be dealt with. It's almost like a house that has burned to the ground, and we now have to start the rebuilding process of it. We now have to start working together. I made mention earlier today that whilst those persons up there are fighting and warring, that the people on the ground are suffering. There are persons who cannot put food on their tables. There are mothers who are going to bed hungry because they've made a decision to feed their children and not themselves. There are, fathers who are considering a life a crime in order to provide for the family. There are all sorts of things happening. The young people who cannot get jobs, they have their good certificate and now have to go back home to live because there is nothing, or they're contemplating leaving. And let me put here that I am happy that finally the central government has sorted out its situation to be able to put the PS in cast and to have those checks sent over to the Tobago House of Assembly. And I dare say that, I challenge them that it could have been resolved before that, because when they had to put on the Commonwealth Games and the procurement issues were up against them, they quickly disappeared it and put on the games, okay, because that was important to the country and that, they didn't want to be embarrassed. So they did what they had to do and put on the games and then went into the House, Parliament, to now treat with the issue of the procurement bill. And I'm saying that that issue should have been cleared up ahead of time in terms of Tobago being able to get its monies, right? And now people will be paid. But the great challenge about that is that this is not just about payment of the people, but the crash of the Tobago economy. And so it's not just one thing plaguing us. I also heard yesterday from Mr. James that the electrical inspectorate is without a person. And the implications of that is enormous. The fact that you now have construction sites that are literally shut down because they cannot become inspected, electricians who now have to go home without work because without that inspection, they can go no further with their jobs, and nobody's going to pay them to stay on a job when there's no work to be performed. So the Tobago economy is in crisis, Tobago is in crisis, and all of us need to pull together to see how we can work together, how we can begin healing. We need an administration that can heal and bring the people together. This is not, about the war. And this current administration is sending a message that they are about secession. I've had a number of concerned Tobagonians questioning that they are sending a message that they are about secession. Tobagonians are not the majority of Tobagonians are not interested in walking that road. We want greater autonomy, which is far different from secession. And greater autonomy that also would deal with the House being more democratic than it is right now.
All right. Thank you very much there, Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus. We got to leave it there for this morning, folks. We're just out of time. But we want to certainly express our appreciation and thanks to Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus, former presiding officer of the Tobago House of Assembly, for joining us here on set this morning. Viewers, at this point, we want to remind you that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live.